Erich Fromm, in his Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, a book I wish everybody would read, the sick individual finds himself at home with all other similarly sick individuals. The whole culture is geared to this kind of pathology. The result is that the average individual does not experience the separateness and isolation the fully schizophrenic person feels. He feels at ease amongst those who suffer from the same deformation. In fact, it is the fully sane person who feels isolated in the insane society. And he may suffer so much from the incapacity to communicate that it is he who may become psychotic. And haven't we all experienced that? From the time we were born, I assume everyone in this room has experienced that. And I would also say this, that if you are sane enough to see the insanity, that's a damn good sign, because it means you're not insane. So as bad as it is to feel bad about the things that are happening, look at the bright side, you can see it. Man runs away from his own shadow self and has a sadistic relationship with himself and with his darker emotions, quote unquote. But, like biological white blood cells, ladies and gentlemen, these darker emotions exist to signal that something is wrong within the body politic and to let us know that we are under attack, either from ourselves or from some other external source. But where are our altars to these dark guardians? You see, your anger, your stress, your hypertension, your fear, right? All of that. These are aspects of ourselves. We've been conditioned to believe and observe them negatively. So we're in inner conflict. Because now you've got a lower part of yourself and a higher part of yourself. You're inwardly divided. Then how are you going to fix external division? Now, you see, the problem is, though, that it's like, imagine your mind is like the court of the king. You don't like it when these hideous, ragged, evil-smelling, foul-looking, wrinkled old guardians come in to tell the story of what they've seen on their travels. No, we want Don Juan and white horses and perfumery and wonderful tales of high adventure. So when these strange people come into our court and try to tell us in their croaking voices an amazing story of where they've been and what they've seen, we go, get away, anger, get away, violence, get away, all of that. And we're told not to listen to these beings. So we have an inner conflict at hand. But these are aspects of ourselves that have an amazing story to tell us about the world and about reality. We better start listening to what these guardians are saying. So we must come into a new kind of relationship with the so-called dark guardians, that part of ourselves that we do not heed. And we've been taught to censor ourselves to a pathological degree and are suffering immensely as a result. You can't live in a one-season world. You can try, but sooner or later the winter will come. And it will come too hard and then you'll be perished because you're not acclimatized to it. But this does not mean, I'm not saying that now we become all perverse and criminal. It merely means that we develop our ego maturity to heed those voices that tell us what violates our inner body politic. Your white blood cells, you couldn't live without them. When a disease or something attacks your system, they come to your help. Well, these dark guardians, especially anger, has a blue flame of anger. Watch the movie Hellboy, because that movie will teach you something about the blue flame of anger. It's a defense mechanism. Yes, if you don't integrate it, it'll become pathological and you'll find its muddy boot prints around and it won't be very pleasant. You'll be thinking, what's that smell? And look at all this mess. Yeah, because you haven't welcomed them in and cleaned them off and listened to what he has had to say under all that dust. But they're knocking to get in, going, the house is burning. Open up, let me tell you about it. You go, oh, get away, you. I call the police, get out. The state that is achieved when we cease being sadistic and punitive with ourselves, when we desist seeking the approval of others, when we free ourselves and others from the tyranny of our dependency. There are also factors involved here in the listening to these incredible parts of us. I'll just say, as controversial as it is, and the psychologists actually should have taught you this a long time ago. And the New Age movement, that's defunct in my opinion as well. Because they have not said what I'm going to say now. And that is, you can get out of your mind any idea that anger and hate and violence have ever caused any problems on this earth. Except when they, as I said, become pathological. But actually, we better wake up and realize that not hate, not anger, not violence has ever caused any of the problems that are on this earth at all. And anyone who believes that has got a very, very limited understanding of the world that they're living in. The problems are caused in this world, ladies and gentlemen, not by those things, but by false love. Now, one of the other problems why what I'm talking about is often not, dawned on a lot of people is because, you see, cruelty to others is, in fact, well documented, obviously, right? The hunt for serial killers, all the movies about it, the quest for justice, the programs. And of course, in physical cruelty, when somebody's beating somebody up or murdering, you can call physical police, and you can go to court, and you can get physical, in-your-face justice about it. But when it's cruelty to the self, who's going to notice? When it's sadism to the self. But my God, cruelty to the self? If you identify with the Father and the prohibitive aspects overly, then you are a walking criminal to yourself. And I am myself personally, you see, not concerned very much with the utter form of crime. I think it's interesting to study. The study will go on, and it's been recognized. We all recognize it. I am infinitely more interested in the unseen form of cruelty that each person does to their own selves, and that must be studied. If you've embodied it because your parents have been rotten, that's probably where it might originate. And they learned it from their parents and so on. But it must stop. And this sadism and necrophilia, the true meaning of the word necrophilia is connected to sadism. It's love of death. It's the thanatos. So when you're not integrating your shadow and you're buying into all this lie that we've been describing, you are basically a lover of the dead. You gain, just like when you peel a scab, you have that sort of morbid, pleasure from peeling a scab. Magnify that many, many, many times. Now there's healthy aspects of that as well. When you see the bully in the school who's pulling the pigtails of the little girl, but the teacher's been observing and then comes and gives him a whack, you get a sort of a perverse pleasure out of that, don't you? So we all have it, but in the psychotic people it's very, very enlarged. That whole feeling that they get a deep and abiding pleasure, because they have murdered their own selfhood. The person who has murdered their own femininity, or masculinity, or who have murdered their own selfhood, well, how do you think they're going to operate outside? How do you think they're going to relate to everyone else? They may have the persona so that they appear to be normal, but the person who has murdered themselves in their life cannot be expected to exist rationally. As I said, if the ego is the ghost that has arisen from the grave of the self, then expect it to act in ghoulish ways. If you leave rotten meat out, expect maggots. Don't blame the maggots. So if you see a body politic, you see, that is rotten in this way, that's why. Because the ego is ruling and the self is dead. The executives are out on holiday. So the office manager has become the king. He's a maniac. He's running around telling everybody what to do. Yes, he opens and locks the doors. He washes the floor. He's very official and he gets a lot of things done. So in fact, technically speaking, the corporation is standing. But it's a very punitive place and you don't want to work there. He's trying to save on light bills. He's bossing everybody around. So the executives have not come in. Spirit is not there. Selfhood is not there. Selfhood has been murdered. And in its place we have something else. And from that we get masochism. Masochism is nothing but sadism to the self. It's just a fancy word for sadism towards oneself. And out of that comes horrors. Your narcissism, your obesity, your bulimia, the body piercing, the drug addiction, the alcoholism. All of this is coming out of a deep and intense violence towards oneself that must end if there's ever to be change in the world. And you must develop the science of observing it, not in others, but in yourself. How do you censor yourself? From that comes the sadism that we're familiar with. The war, the rape, the murder, the misogyny, the megadeath. All of that is a mere external version of something inside. And then it extends even from that point out to nature and to animals. But it's all rooted inside oneself. And what's the cocktail? Obesity, anorexia, insomnia, hypertension, obsession with appearance. My God, you don't have to turn on the television. Obsession with appearance and cosmetic appearance. And then the fitness mania, which is nothing more than another form of sadism, hard-bodied, as Wilhelm Reich would have easily shown us. And do you notice the mechanicalistic, monotonous repetition of the way that they even present exercise? It's not done in a very yin or organic way. Even the exercise machines that they show you are demonic. And the message that they're sending you about what you think health is meant to be. Routine, mechanical, movements of the body, totally anti-organic and anti-feminine. And there's so many of those. Why? Because they're selling you a message. And the depression and the ADD and the delinquency and the addiction. And look what's buried in the middle of all of that. The chronic dependency. The key. You can't be anything unless somebody else has given you approval. And mostly you don't get the approval, so as the psychologists well know, look what then happens to us when we don't get it. Look what then becomes of us and what we start doing when we don't have that approval from somebody. Look what we turn ourselves into. Now, anxiety is an interesting word. It's used a lot. It's different than fear. Anxiety comes from the German word Angst. But the psychologists in Germany were saying, look, fear is the word that means when you're being attacked from outside. It's the emotion that you feel when there's a legitimate physical attack. Angst is very different. Angst is from within, when there's something about yourself that's in disorder or malaise. That needs to be borne in mind. What we're having today when we're talking about anxiety disorders is all rooted in what I've been talking about. And then we have the cures, because of course we're not doing the healthy work to solve the problem. No. As I said, we poison ourselves with toxic foodstuffs full of contaminants and then seek respite for our terrible inner discomfort on a physical level from a leviathan that administers nothing more than further poisons to us in the name of our health. Isn't that a symptom of our psychosis? But we want that, because what's it all really based on? The doctor's another daddy. Are you feeling better now, darling? Oh, yes, doctor. You're feeling like hell, but don't irritate the doctor. Roll up the sleeve. They could tell you to do somersaults and bend over backwards and people will do it. Because that animus figure is very important. But a priest, pope, politician, doctor, tutor, you see, the whole 9 yards. The expert. Look, we're in submission to the expert. Everyone else is more powerful and more knowledgeable. And we've given our power away to the worst kind of sadists. Because these individuals themselves are not spiritually pure and clean and cannot rise up high to feel high. So their mentality is to push and artificially repress good people so they feel great. They're not actually doing anything to spiritually progress or mature, but they are doing a lot to hold you down, and that's how they get their feeling of greatness. The petty tyrant in your neighborhood does the same thing. The bully in school does the same thing. You see, anyone who's had to deal, anybody here has actually had to deal with psychotic people or schizophrenics or people, it's very difficult to tell those people that their thinking is deranged. They think they're perfectly normal. Partly, as I said, they've adjusted to reality as they see it, so they're not wholly to blame. But even in the worst chronic syndrome, you will find that you're wasting your time. You could roll out your soul like a red carpet, and they'll walk right on it. Because they are thinking you're the dummy. You're the dumbass. You got it wrong. As we saw, Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to stop from facing their souls. You've heard me put it differently. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to stop facing their shadow self. And that's an enormous problem. You won't face it, but you will project it on somebody else and curse them out and then destroy their innocent lives, or not so innocent, by your projections. That you can manage to do. Now, of course, this return to selfhood and the division, right, the divorce from all that is false, is very painful and traumatic to the ego of man, because the ego is well happy with all of that. The ego has made its home here, and now you're telling it to burn down its shack. Because look, I just built this thing. And therefore, hence, as I've been saying, the avoidance and the gimmicks and the denial and the projection and everything else that we're involved with. But as Friedrich Nietzsche said, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will often be lonely. And you will sometimes even be frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. The magician from the 19th century, Aleister Crowley, he puts it this way, talking in incredible language. Anyone who is forced from his own course, either through not understanding himself or through external imposition, comes into conflict with the order of the universe and suffers accordingly. So if there's stress and suffering in your life, there's a reason. As I said, those are red flags. Those are guardians coming and knocking on your door saying, hey, part of the building is crumbling. Things are off. Your suffering is your guide. Your fear, your tension, your nightmares, you can't drug it out of existence. You can't medicate it. Well, you can, but it's that's destruction. That's annihilation. Is what you're basically doing, and more so, you're producing leviathans who prey upon you by doing that. When you accept that you can do something about it, and you see this, whenever suffering or anger or pain enters into your life, you listen to it. You let it wash over you. In the movie Dune, they talk about this from the books of Frank Herbert. There's many other movies and other art forms that talk about this, that explain this concept that I'm talking about. And once upon a time, it was the teachings of all yoga and magic and religion. This is what I'm talking about. Where you say, then teach me. I won't try to escape from you. You keep pestering me. I'm not going to run away from you anymore. Tell me why you're here. And slowly, if you're silent enough, forget about third eyes, develop a third ear. And listen very calmly and quietly and still to your angst and pain and suffering and sorrow. Don't medicate it out of existence or try to silence it, because it's got an amazing story to tell you. And you see, the God force in this universe is not going to turn its volume up to be heard. You have to turn your racket down.